Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of Call to the Bullpen. I am one of your co-hosts, Jared Silberkleit.
And I am Austin Keeney, and we actually have a third co-host joining us tonight.
And I'm Ricky Cambo. Happy to be here.
Hey, Ricky. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Alrighty, ladies and gents. So this is going to be our all football, no baseball, NFL season preview episode. We're going to break down the entire league, division by division, predictions, speculation, all that good stuff. The season is at recording time approximately 72 hours from kickoff.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yep. So, yeah, without further ado, let's just dive right into it. I think that we should start off AFC East. I don't know about you guys, but I think that cracks are starting to show in the foundation of the Patriots.
I think there are, but I don't know if anyone else can take advantage. So it could be the kind of deal where cracks are starting to show. They aren't as good as have been in recent years, but they'll still go 10-6 or something, and that's still enough to win the division.
I mean, I definitely see the Jets being a contender. I don't know if they can contend well enough to outplay the Patriots in the entire division. I see the Jets somewhere as a 500 team this year. But again, definitely not overtaking the Patriots for the top spot. I mean, no matter if there's cracks in the foundation's still there. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are still there. Tom Brady is still the best quarterback of all time. It's just they still have obviously the tools to win.
Yeah, and the Dolphins and the Bills, they seem to have lost too much to be able to capitalize on it, especially Miami. But with Buffalo, I mean, Josh Allen, the fact that they're not comfortable starting him ahead of Nathan Peterman, I think that says quite a lot about the kind of preseason that he's had. But the Jets have the most upside. They probably have the best chance, although, again, not saying much. I'm not sure they're going to do enough to really threaten for the division title, but I do see them being a dark horse wildcard contender.
I feel a little differently than you two. So, full disclosure, to those who do not know, I'm from Miami. I am a Miami Dolphins fan, so I obviously have a bias and a stake in the game here. But I think that the problem with the Jets is that, in general, if you look at the history of the NFL, and we're going to talk about this a lot, I'm sure, as we talk about other teams, because I feel this way about a lot of teams that have the same problem. In general, you bet against rookie quarterbacks. Like, even the ones that turned out to be really, really good still made a lot of mistakes that you didn't see coming in the preseason during the regular season and still cost their team to win a lot of games. Like, Dak Prescott got the 1 seed in the NFC a few years ago, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Like, most rookie quarterbacks generally struggle. Most teams that with rookie quarterbacks generally don't win a lot of games. And it makes sense because it's not just that the quarterback is inexperienced, but the type of team that usually starts a rookie quarterback is usually a team that was picking high in the draft, so they had a bad roster in the first place. Or it's a team that is rebuilding and transitioning into a new era of the franchise. You're kind of seeing that with Kansas City this year as they're rebuilding to a new team, starting Pat Mahomes for the first time. And usually, as a result, teams with rookie quarterbacks, if you look at the stats, they just don't do that well. I like Darnold. I love him long-term. I think long-term he's going to be really good. But I think there's a lot of hype on him right now and a lot of problems that are going to happen that people don't see coming. He had a penchant for making dumb turnovers in college. I think that'll translate to his rookie year. I think that, much like people forget, but DeShone Kizer, probably not a name that gets a lot of attention, but DeShone Kizer, fans were very excited. He looked good. He was making tough throws. He was going through his reads. He was going down the field, and fans were excited about him. So was the franchise. And then very quickly, just like the turnovers, just started mounting and mounting and mounting. And now no one even remembers what people were saying in the preseason about Kizer. Blake Bortles is another one. Blake Bortles had a fantastic preseason. He had 10.5 yards per attempt that preseason. And then the regular season started, and he started throwing picks. And I think it's going to be similar with Darnold. I still believe long-term he's a great prospect, and the hype is really high right now. But when the season starts, he's going to make mistakes, and I don't think the defense on that team is good enough to make up for it, even though Bowles occasionally has some good schemes here and there. I just think that team I do agree with these two, that they have a lot of upside, because if he is like a Dak Prescott, and it just all clicks right away, then fine. Maybe a lot of my concerns won't occur. But if he does have the rookie pain that I expect him to have, I wouldn't bet on that team being the second best team in the division. But that's, again, just my feel, just based on my distrust of rookie quarterbacks.
You do make a great point with the rookie quarterbacks, because when you look at somebody like Dak Prescott, he obviously was on the higher end of rookie quarterback success, and that wasn't really a case of a quarterback coming in and putting this team on his back. I mean, he had about as good of a supporting cast as you could ask for. An elite offensive line, a top 5, top 3 running back in the league, and reliable receiving options like Dez and Witten. And I don't think Darnold is coming into quite the same situation.
No.
Yeah, he's got probably the most upside of what we've seen from this year's draft class of quarterbacks. And the Jets did show some youthful exuberance last year. I think that the Jets always seem to be, when they come into those seasons with the bottom level expectations, people expect 2-14 or less, they always seem to win a few more than people think. So if that trend continues, I think that they could top out around 8-8, potentially 9-7, but that does seem like best case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see them as an 8-8, kind of team. I mean, I think that Darnold is... I agree with you on the rookie quarterback side of things, but I definitely see him having a lot more upside than most of the rookie quarterbacks that have come in recent past. I see them somewhere in the 8-8 range.
No, and I think it's true to make that claim. I mean, I thought he was the top quarterback in the draft, in a draft class that was hyped up to be like the best draft class for quarterbacks in decades. I mean, they had 5 in the first round for, I believe, the first time ever, or something close to that. So I definitely understand like betting on the upside. I wouldn't disagree on that. I guess it's, for me, betting against rookies and just the team in general, which is kind of, I think, obviously biased, but my Dolphins, I think, are better than they're being given credit for. They are not this bottom-feeding team that they are made out to be. They historically have never been that. They've always been a 7-8 win team. That's what they've been for decades now. And people trying to paint them as some sort of like top pick in the draft kind of team, I think you're just going to be really disappointed. That's just not really what they do. They're kind of just a middling team, middle of the road. I think they're going to be solid this year. I think they're going to go 8-8, maybe 9-7, but more likely 8-8, just because Tannehill played really well under Adam Gase 2 years ago. Last year, the Dolphins didn't have their starting quarterback, and they still went 6-10. And it's actually more impressive than people realize, because in the last game of the season, they did not start their starting quarterback, Jay Cutler, who admittedly sucked, but still better than the backup, David Fales. They punted on the last game of the season because they wanted to get a look at David Fales, and they almost won the game. We had a drive with a 2-minute warning drill, down 6 points to win the game. So had they won that game with Jay Cutler instead, maybe the perception of this team would be different, because going 6-10 without your starter, look at the Packers. They lost Aaron Rodgers, and that team went 3-7 the rest of the way. The Houston Texans lost Deshaun Watson and bottomed out for the rest of the season. Across the NFL, when teams lose their starting quarterback, the team usually wins like 2 to 3 games. And the Dolphins won 6. That's nothing to get. It's still just 6-10, but that is a level of like recovery that most other franchises haven't proven to be capable of. That doesn't mean they're going to win 12 games this year with a starter. Of course not. I think Gase is a better coach than he's given credit for. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a better coach than Todd Bowles. And I think that he and the Dolphins will find a way to be second in the division this year.
I honestly see the Dolphins somewhere in that same 6-10 range that they were last year, and I hear where you're coming from. I don't think they're the bottom of the barrel team, because I think we can all agree that that's most likely the Bills.
Correct.
However, I definitely see the Dolphins in a 6-10. Maybe I'll give them a 7-win season. And the only thing that scares me is the fact that now you don't have Jarvis Landry, and you also don't have Sue. Sue is a big defensive player. Jarvis Landry is obviously a great wide receiver, so you lost some big weapons, regardless of quarterback situation. losing those weapons is not good. I mean, look at an Eli Manning with an Odell when Odell goes down, or say a Randy Moss had gone down with a Tom Brady. Obviously, Tom Brady's still good, but when you lose a big your best wide receiver, arguably, it definitely doesn't help.
And when you have a questionable offensive line, not only do you need quality receiving options, you need quality receiving options with speed, and that's what Landry provided to that team. So I got to ask you, as a Dolphins fan, how are you feeling about, losing J.J. Middle of last season as well, trading in him and Landry for essentially Kenyon Drake and Danny Amendola?
Well, it's Danny Amendola and Albert Wilson, and I do think that matters because their perspective was, instead of paying $16 million to Landry, let's pay $8 million to Albert Wilson and $6 million to Amendola, so you kind of get like a 2-for-1 deal going. Firstly, I think Kenyon Drake is better than J.J. I think Adam Gase knew that, and that's why Adam Gase traded J.J. And even though it was a controversial move at the time, Kenyon Drake led the NFL in rushing the last 5 weeks of the season last year. And J.J. is going to be in a multiple RB formation. Drake is a better receiver out of the backfield. He's faster. He's more elusive. And I think Gase saw, in practice, this guy's a better player. And so far, that's been true. So far, Drake, I would take over J.J., so I'm okay with that. On the receiver front, I admit it's a concern, but because, Landry was just very reliable, but I do not know. We will see if their mentality of getting production from two guys instead of production from one, we will see if that strategy works. I think we're going to be fine because those two guys I think are pretty good, and I think the offense will be about what it always is, 6th, 17th in the NFL or something like that. But you guys could be right. Maybe without Landry, the offensive production falls apart. We don't know, but I based on what I've seen so far in the preseason, I'm content with it as of now.
Okay, last note on the AFC East before we move on. You mentioned 10-6 for the Patriots. So is this finally the season where the Patriots cease to dominate as the top seed of the AFC, and are they going to wind up playing in the wild card round? And how will that impact their playoff prospects? As far as long range, a potential Super Bowl return.
I don't really know because my thing is the AFC has a lot of weird things going on with all the top teams. The Chargers, a lot of people are talking about as their favorite to win the team, but they have a lot of game management issues with the coach, and they kind of have disappointed from time to time over the past few years. The Jaguars have a terrible quarterback. And I don't care that they made the AFC Championship game last year. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that team goes 7-9. I'm not necessarily going to predict that, but it really wouldn't surprise me because whenever you have a bad quarterback in the NFL, it's easy to lose games, and no matter how good the rest of the team is. And the Steelers are another one of those top-feeding teams, but they're going through all this drama with Le'Veon Bell. The defense got a lot worse when Shazier got hurt. It's just no one's perfect. So, yeah, the Patriots have a lot of flaws. Their wide receiver core is really depleted this year. Brady clearly has a fictitious relationship with the coaching staff. Gronk usually gets hurt. And the defense, I still think, is a sieve, as it was last year. They have all these problems, but I'm not quite ready to say that they'll play in the wild card round. I know I said 10-6, but 10-6, 11-5, something like that. All the top teams have warts of some kind. So I don't really know what to say regarding their future. I don't know if you guys feel differently, but that's me.
Something, this kind of reminds me of there was that one season, the first time the Saints made the playoffs with Drew Brees, where they wound up the second seed at 10-6, and I think in the AFC this year that could absolutely happen. See, there's a lot of uncertainty across the board. It seems like the teams with the most upside are also the teams with the least experience, like the Texans or the Chargers. So. And, teams like the Patriots and Steelers are starting to age and break down. So this could be a case where the top-seeded team is 11-5, second seed could be 10-6.
Yeah, I can see the Patriots at an 11-5, maybe a 12-4 kind of situation. And that would be me pushing it at 12-4. But, at 11-5, I could call it at.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. The problem is, they're still going to probably they're not going to sweep the Dolphins because the Dolphins play the Patriots better than any other team in the NFL. Sounds crazy, but they've beaten them 4 of the last 5 years. Find any other team in the NFL that can claim that success against New England. And so they won't sweep us, but they'll sweep the other 2 teams this year, I think. And I think they'll beat us at home. And when you just go 5-1 in your division, it's just so easy to pile up wins.
Oh, of course.
So despite all their problems, like if they just go 5-1 in their division and pick up, the random wins here and there, it won't be hard for them to construct like a 10, 11 win season, even with the problems they have. So
because that's batting 500 against the rest of the league. So especially with the Bills to beat up on, and if the Jets go the other way, so you can see why they've established that kind of consistency. But we are going to segue into the AFC North. I think we kind of touched on it a little bit. You mentioned the problems that the Steelers are having with Le'Veon Bell, but with their track record, I think it's safe to still peg them as the favorites to repeat, right?
I think so. I think that, everyone's hyping up the Ravens this year, but I don't buy it. Joe Flacco's been playing bad football for a very long time.
Joe Flacco's been a bum for the last 5 straight years. He's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's just, like I said earlier with Blake Bortles, bad quarterbacks tend to lose football games. It's just...
And it's not like they have a lot of extra weapons. They may have a guy here or there, and honestly, I can't even think of a top-tier player on the Ravens off the top of my head. That's how kind of irrelevant in my mind they are. I don't see them being a second-place team. Sadly, I barely see. I wish there was 5 teams in that division, because I don't even see the Bengals being a second-place team in the division. But obviously, out of 4 teams, somebody's got to be second place. So, but yeah, I could see the Steelers being up on top, even with their issues with. With Bell, you still have, Antonio Brown and Smith-Schuster, and you still have a lot of big weapons on that team.
Well, I will say this, it really comes down to the quarterback play with the Ravens, because they absolutely retooled a little bit on offense with Michael Crabtree and John Brown coming in. But, yeah, the way Flacco's been throwing the football, and it seems like this year, his job could be in jeopardy a little bit. I don't think that they're going to totally commit to Lamar, but I do think that if Flacco struggles again, you could see a move being made for next year. That being said, they've always been, Harbaugh's a good coach. He's held the post for, obviously a really long time at this point. They've always had a quality defense. They're really good at playing that tough AFC North brand of football that always seems to pick them up about 8 or 9 wins. I see them, much like last year, narrowly missing out on a playoff spot. And, with their brand of football, you're not going to be able to you're not going to really be able to break that 10-win plateau when you're averaging 17, 20 points a game tops. And that's what they've been with Joe Flacco as quarterback ever since they won the Super Bowl. So I do see them finishing second place, but I think it's going to be a situation like last year where they're going to blow a game that could have gotten them in.
And I think that I liked John Brown in Arizona. I thought he was a little underrated. And Crabtree, had a really good season 2 years ago, and Willie Snead's a decent player. The problem is none of those guys are true number ones. They don't have a true number 1 option. They signed a bunch of number 2 and number 3 receivers.
Right.
Granted, talented number 2 and number 3 receivers, but none of those guys are really a go-to weapon on every down, and that's what I think will still limit the passing game a bit. It is possible. Look, Alex Smith played his best year of his career last year, and I think that wasn't a coincidence that it came the year they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes drafting a quarterback in the first round is worth it just because he motivates your starter, even if you don't plan on playing him. And we saw Alex Smith had a career year last year after producing stats nowhere near as good with just as talented of an offense in the years prior. Tyreek Hill was there in 2016. Travis Kelce was there in 2016. Kareem Hunt wasn't, but Spencer Ware was, and Spencer Ware had a really good season. And so he had all these talented players and still was just putting up pedestrian numbers. And last year he was great. And it was because, I think, he was pushed by Patrick Mahomes. So maybe drafting Lamar does get Flacco to magically improve, but I wouldn't trust that fact more than, his play over the last 5 years. And I don't think he has, Travis Kelce's an elite player. Kareem Hunt last year was an elite player. Tyreek Hill's a great player. Doesn't have any of those guys. So That's what makes me doubt it. But I do agree. Second in the division, probably going to win a lot of games, but not be a huge factor in the conference.
Yeah, I would peg the Steelers winning it with probably 10, 11 wins. But a lot of talk this offseason has been about the new-look Cleveland Browns, who might not get a top 5 pick for once.
I don't know. I still see them losing the division. I still see them at the bottom of the barrel.
I'm not saying 500.
No, nor even close. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 wins if they're lucky. I don't think their quarterback situation is going to help them in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I don't. They brought a lot of bodies in to help, and I just don't see it being a first-year thing, really.
I agree with him. I just think that. Look, man, that roster last year wasn't as bad as 0-16. Like that roster should have won 4 to 5 games according to all metrics. They won 0-16 because their coaching was really bad, and that's why I don't care how good the roster looks on paper, on offense, and some of the pieces they have on defense. Coaching staff finds ways to lose games even with talent. Last year they lost to the Steelers backups that last week of the season.
Right.
That wasn't an issue of talent. Obviously, like it was a team of starters versus a team of backups. Like they lost to the Brett Hundley Packers with a 23-7 lead. Lost so many games because of coaching, and they didn't deserve to go 0-16. They had far more talent than that. A lot of the guys in the current team were there last year too. Like not some of like the flashy names like Tyrod or Jarvis or Carlos Hyde, but like a lot of those players were there last year too. Like I just think that. Yeah, no matter how good it looks, I think the coaching will cause them to lose games that they shouldn't lose, and I think they'll win 3 games.
If Josh Gordon, I mean, we don't know entirely what to expect out of him, but if he's able to rebound in any way to oppose Jarvis Landry, that could be a pretty good 1-2 punch. And I mean,
yes,
yeah, and David Njoku, he kind of had a bit of a disappointing rookie campaign. He was one of the more heralded tight ends in his draft, so. I mean, but yeah, really, when you think about the coaching, I mean, number one, you have Hugh Jackson not playing Baker Mayfield with the first-team offense at all in the preseason, and number two, playing Tyrod when he was hurt.
Yes.
So you're looking at a guy who, not sure how he stuck around after a winless campaign, but there's been talk of him potentially being replaced mid-season.
Yeah, it could happen. You might see Todd Haley coach the team soon. Who knows?
Yeah. But I think with general gist of it, I think we're all pretty much seeing only one playoff team coming out of this division, right?
I'd agree with the Steelers.
Yeah, Steelers.
Same.
And now we get to what might be. Nobody thought that they'd be hearing this just a couple of years ago. The best division in football, the AFC South.
Yeah, I mean, with the injuries that the Texans dealt with last year, I see them really rebounding to take control of that division. As good as the Jaguars are, we kind of touched on it a little bit before. Blake Bortles is not an elite quarterback. I think he's mediocre at best, and I can say I'm a big fan of the Jaguars. I mean, I'm obviously a Giants fan I'm a Giants fan.
You're a Giants
at heart,
yeah.
if I could speak today.
Right.
Giants fan at heart, as everybody already knows for the past 5 episodes. But I like the Jaguars. I think they're a great team. I think they have a great mentality. I really like how Jalen Ramsey. Granted, he has a little bit more attitude. I like the grittiness that he's playing with, and really trying to get that defense aggressive in really trying to win games and control teams. But I see the Texans, especially with having Tyrann Mathieu in the back, in the secondary now. I mean, that's a huge addition to an already phenomenal defense. And with Deshaun Watson coming back and DeAndre Hopkins being one of the best wide receivers in the league statistically, I can really see them taking control of that division, rebounding from last year, and maybe ended up in somewhere in the 11-5 range.
I feel the Texans have like the the widest range of outcomes of any team in the NFL to me, because what he just described, I think, is exactly what could happen. Like, just would not surprise me at all. I always thought Bill O'Brien was an underrated coach. I know a lot of people think he's not very good, but he's won a lot of games with a lot of bad quarterbacks over the years, which is pretty impressive and not easy to do. So I'm high on them, but I think there is risk. You know, we don't know how Deshaun comes off the torn ACL, and his level of play last year, while it was, crazy good, it was also, he got very lucky. Like, according to a lot of charting stats, like, his touchdown percentage was just, like, insane. Like something that, like, no one in NFL history has ever done.
Yeah, what did he throw? 17 touchdowns in the first...
19.
Yeah, in the first 6 games or whatever it was. I mean, it was unreal.
He threw a touchdown on 10% of his throws. Like, it's insane. Like, no one... Like, that's just totally unsustainable, I think. Now, those numbers could regress, and he could still play awesome. Like, it's no big deal. But what more so concerns me with Deshaun Watson is that he got really lucky on interceptions last year. He still threw, like, a good amount of picks, but he actually should have thrown more, according to people who, like, chart this stuff on every down. They were saying that there were a lot of throws that, like, went through defenders' hands, etc. And whenever that stuff usually happens, those guys usually end up throwing a lot more interceptions the following year because the luck catches up with them. But I think Deshaun Watson's also a really special player, unlike anyone we've seen in a long time. So I think these effects could happen, but still not be enough to tank his play. But it also wouldn't surprise me, I guess, if he struggles recovering from the injury or something like that, and the Texans kind of disappoint a little bit. It's unclear. They have the widest range of outcomes. I do think they'll be good. I do think they'll make the playoffs. But the team I like the most out of this division is the Titans. I just
really
think they're the most complete. Yes, absolutely. And let me tell you, the Titans last year were a much better team than their record indicated. Their coaching staff was terrible. Advantage of the benefits of that offense. But now they got good O-line, probably the best O-line in the division. And that's also a concern for the Texans. Their O-line is one of the worst in the league. So that is something to keep an eye on. But the Titans have a good O-line. They have, in my opinion, the best running back combination in the NFL right now with Derrick Henry and Deion Lewis. I think Deion Lewis is going to play a lot more than people realize. And their receiving core is going to get better. Like, Taywan Taylor is a year older. Corey Davis is a year older. Delaney Walker's still out there. And they hired Matt LaFleur from the Rams. Matt LaFleur learned under Sean McVay. So you're going to see a passing offense that's going to go 5 wide, let Marcus Mariota go through each read, and let Marcus Mariota take advantage of his skill set by mixing in some runs here and there, but also his quick thinking and getting them through each progression. Also, last year, Matt LaFleur oversaw an offense that had Todd Gurley, that threw the ball a lot to Todd Gurley on screens and misdirections, etc. And I think he'll do that a lot with Deion Lewis. You'll see Deion Lewis, who's a talented athlete, come out of the backfield, get thrown to a lot, and be a key factor of the game. The defense has some concerns, but I think this applies for a few teams in this division because the Texans last year had the worst defense in the league.
They were bit by the injury bug pretty severely.
Yeah, I mean, losing J.J. Watt is not good.
They were hit by the injury bug pretty severely. I'm not denying that, but there's just a lot of their players are older. Jonathan Joseph just isn't as good as he once was, and he was getting burned a lot last year, and you have him coming back. And I love Honey Badger, but Joseph is still going to play a big role. J.J. Watt has now had 2 season-ending injuries 2 years in a row. Like he was hurt after week 3 the year before last year.
Yeah, I mean, but they still have Clowney and they added Merciless, so I mean that's 2 huge players right there.
It is. It's just depending on how the secondary plays, and maybe Honey Badger just plays good enough to change everything.
Yeah.
But Kevin Johnson and Jonathan Joseph are big concerns for that defense. And for the Titans, like, they got, in my opinion, the best safety in the NFL last year, and Kevin Byard. And he had a great season. And they have a lot of guys like that in the secondary who just kind of fly to the ball. And that, plus the offense getting a lot better. Marcus Mariota last year statistically was the unluckiest quarterback in the NFL. Almost all of his bad throws were caught, which is why his interception total was so high. But people who do this, who chart this, point out that, like, he was throwing interceptable passes way less often than someone like Blake Bortles, than someone like Ben Roethlisberger, than someone like, Jay Cutler, like a lot of quarterbacks in the AFC last year. But it's just every time he threw an interceptable pass, it was caught. Like, he was crazy unlucky last year. According to interception pass statistics, he was the unluckiest quarterback in terms of interceptions caught of the past 20 years. So I think he's a lot better than people realize. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the conference. And I think this year his interception numbers are going to go way down. The touchdowns are going to go up. And the offense is going to score a lot. And the defense can do enough with an aggressive secondary to take advantage and win a lot of games. I like them and the Texans in the playoffs this year, but I like them a little more because I don't think they have as much concern with the O-line and with the quarterback coming back from injury like the Texans do.
I think that if you listen to player interviews from the Texans toward the end of the season, this is a team that was just really angry. They really felt like, you talked about how the Browns statistically didn't, they looked like they should have won. They should have won some games last year. The Texans, in their hearts, believe that they were absolutely not a 4-12 team, and I think, I think that you talk about running back tandems. They've got a pretty good one of their own in Lamar Miller, Alfred Blue, and I think that their offensive upside is greater than that of Tennessee. I think that with Tennessee's running back tandem will allow Mariota to be less overexposed throwing the ball downfield and make use of his legs, but I think that, again, the Texans have more upside in that department. Vrabel as a head coach, doesn't give me a ton of confidence. I don't know if he's that much of an upgrade over what they dealt with last year.
We don't know. He may be, he may not be. We don't know. I just want to say, not to interrupt, I totally agree that the Texans have more upside. I would never contest that. I guess you're asking me like a prediction, what I think is most likely to happen.
Sure,
I think the Texans have the most upside. I think it's more likely that Tennessee's offense performs better.
So you mentioned both of them finding their way into the playoffs. You see Jacksonville missing.
Yes, I do.
Right.
I think, Blake Bortles is just really bad, and I don't want to make this argument sound very cliche and unnuanced, because that defense is great, but here's the problem. Those kind of teams, with that kind of a defense, that doesn't always sustain from year to year. In 2016, in the second half of the season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had one of the highest-ranked defenses in the NFL. They went 9-7 that year with Jameis. There was some playoff hype for them. And in Hard Knocks, the following summer, August of 2017, Dirk Cutter was even telling Jameis, you don't have to take as many risks anymore because we actually have a really good defense on this team. And then that defense got absolutely destroyed last year. Denver Broncos won a Super Bowl with one of the best defenses ever. The very next year, it was still an elite pass defense, but as a run defense, it struggled. And then last year, the Denver defense just fell apart. So, we've seen historically, I'm not denying the talent on that Jaguars defense because it is incredible, but we've seen historically that those kind of defenses don't usually last, especially one like Jacksonville, where a lot of their best players are older. And as much as I like Malik Jackson and Calais Campbell, they've been in the league for a long time. And you don't know when their play could suddenly drop off.
Right.
So as good as I think Jalen Ramsey is, as good as I think AJ Bouye is, and Miles Jack and Telvin Smith, they got a lot, and Yannick Ngakoue, they got a lot of talented players. I'm well aware, but I just think it's very likely the defense slips a bit. And if the defense slips, Blake Bortles is the kind of quarterback where he needs to play with a lead to be successful.
Yes.
It's not coincidental that all three of those playoff games, the Jaguars were leading the entire game. Obviously, in the Patriots game, not until the very end, but all three games, the Jaguars had success because they had the lead first and carried it for a long time. Maybe Buffalo was up 3-0 at one point, but that's not a big enough lead to really matter. But anyways, they had the lead and they sustained it. When Jacksonville has to play from behind, Blake Bortles has to start making some throws down the field, and that's when he's going to make mistakes. And I think if the defense gets worse this year, Blake is going to have to do that more often, and he's going to struggle. Hey, the 2015 Broncos won a Super Bowl, and the very next year they didn't even make the playoffs. And that's because no matter how good that defense was, and it was elite the year before, the quarterback play still limited them, and the defense slipped, and they went from winning the Super Bowl to going 9-7 and missing the playoffs. And that's kind of what I think can happen with Jacksonville. It wouldn't surprise me if they made the playoffs because I still think they'll win 8 to 9 games, but I don't trust them more than I trust Houston and Tennessee. And so I do think they'll slip out despite having like an otherworldly talented defense last year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I see the Jaguars somewhere in a second place in the division kind of situation. I don't know if I feel the same way about the Titans. I think the Texans are really going to take the top of that division, and I'm even going to go out on a limb and say Bill O'Brien wins Coach of the Year. I think with the injuries they had last year and the potential that this team actually has to perform and to show off, if you will, I think they can really put up some big numbers and wow the crowd.
And bringing it back to Jacksonville, I think more so than Blake Bortles' unreliable quarterback play, think about the fact that this guy really doesn't have a lot of support as far as receiving options. Marquise Lee's season-ending injury, that really deals a big blow to an offense that's very thin on reliable weapons. Keelan Cole showed some promise. He didn't become a starter until later on last season, but is he a guy that you want as your number one right now? I don't think so. I think that he's a guy who still needs another year of development in that number 2 slot. And apart from him, who have you got? Dede Westbrook, Austin Seferian-Jenkins. This is not the type of support system for a quarterback that needs all he can get. So that pretty much leaves it entirely on Leonard Fournette, who, again, best in the game, one of the best in the game. But what is the end to what you mentioned about the defense? Teams with elite defenses not necessarily carrying over for multiple seasons. We saw with the Giants last year, what can be the undoing? Yeah. What can be the undoing of a defense, right? Over exhaustion, those constant offensive 3 and outs, having to be on the field instead of 30 minutes for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, punt after punt, getting back on the field, back on the field. Yeah.
That also, you can also apply that to Denver too. That was also part of the problem.
Oh yeah.
Just constantly having to get back on. And the only other random thing I wanted to say is the Jaguars defense last year also had a lot of injury luck. Like almost none of their key guys missed any serious length of time, and I also don't think that carries over. I think they're probably I'm not rooting for injuries. No one ever does, and it feels weird to predict an injury, but I just don't know if they can have the same injury luck this year that they did last year. And if someone like Jalen Ramsey, is out after week 2, the entire dynamic of that team changes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those Texans and Jaguars games could be very, very interesting because the matchups are just polar opposites on both sides.
It'll be fun to watch.
Oh, yeah. So, lastly, in the AFC, we got the AFC West. I think that this year, it's the Chargers division for the taking. I mean, this is a team that they went on a little bit of a run last year, but they dug themselves into too deep of a hole to climb out of. But even when they started 0-4, it wasn't a disastrous 0-4. There were a lot of their losses last year were not by a lot. And it's a roster that's loaded with talent. I think it's safe to say that they have the best offense in that division. And I mean, pass rush wise, they can certainly create havoc up there on the line. So I'm going to predict a solid 10-6 playoff year for the Chargers.
I will as well. I might even go higher than that if I had more confidence, like in the coaching staff. But it's mainly because we'll get to this in a second. I don't think this division is very good this year.
No.
I think Kansas City's going to take a step back. Oakland is almost guaranteed. I've never seen a team like almost guaranteed to be bad, like the Oakland Raiders. Like the NFL's so unpredictable, but like it's just so hard to see a world where the Raiders are very good this year. And the Broncos have a lot of problems of their own. So just like kind of like with the Patriots, right? Like if you can win a lot of games in your own division, like it can really propel you. Like that's why we didn't talk about the Colts, but very quickly I want to say I think people are underrating them because Andrew Luck is a great. Andrew Luck's a great player. He's won with terrible rosters before, so I don't care how bad the roster is. He took a terrible roster to the AFC title game one year. But it's the problem of just, like, in your own division, can they beat the Texans, Jaguars, and Titans? And it's like, if you can't beat the teams in your own division, it's just really hard to have a good record. So the inverse of that, I think, applies here for the Chargers. Like, they have all those strengths. Their secondary is super underrated. Like, it's not just the arrival of Derwin James. They have a lot of guys in the back end who are so underrated, who played a lot of snaps last year. Like, Casey Hayward led the league in interceptions, but guys like Trevor King and other players in the secondary, Trevor Williams, I think, they were just freaking superstars, and no one ever heard their names, but they played really, really well. And so that, with the pass rush, with the offense still going to be productive, and with the bad division, I think it's very, very possible they win 10, 11 games, maybe even 12, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I am a Chiefs secondary fan, if you will, per my significant other being a Chiefs fan. I kind of have to, or I sleep on the couch. So I want to pull for the Chiefs, but what scares me is their defense. Eric Berry's been, out for the last couple preseason games with a heel, and I don't even know if they said if it's that same heel from last year or if it's the opposing heel. But their defense scares me. Sorensen just went out on the IR, I believe now. Eric Berry's out still. He hasn't even played yet. I think their offense can be very good. I want to pull for Patrick Mahomes. I think he has a lot of talent. I think adding...
The kid's got a cannon for an arm.
Yeah, and he's got speed, and he's smart with the ball, and I think adding a Sammy Watkins to that offense that's already... obviously statistically charged with Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill and arguably one of the best tight ends in the league with Kelsey. I think their offense is high-powered enough to really produce, but I don't think their defense is capable of stopping teams from beating them, really. And I would go with the Chargers also, just out of principle. That same thing that you said, the Raiders this year are most likely going to be bad. I can't say they will be, because obviously there's always a shot that something happens.
Sure.
But I think we can all agree that the Broncos are probably a third place, maybe second place, if the Chiefs really fall in really can't stop any offenses. But I think maybe their offense is good enough to sneak out a couple games.
Yeah, and the Chiefs have always been a team that has thrived off of one of the greatest home field advantages in the NFL because of how loud it gets in Arrowhead.
And it gets real loud in Arrowhead.
Yeah. But they've also struggled, on the road, the converse. I mean, this is a team that last year lost to my miserable Giants on a late in overtime. The big deciding throw went to Roger Lewis, and that's what put them away. And this is when they were in the midst of contention, and I mean that game might have cost them playoff seeding.
Yeah.
I think that with obviously moving to Patrick Mahomes, this is going to be an experiment season. It's a necessary experiment season because you drafted the guy for a reason. So moving on from Alex Smith, given his age, was the right move. So it can go one way or the other with them. They could live or die this season based on his play. I am going to tentatively predict 9-7 for the Chiefs, and I'm going to say that they will get the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs.
I think everything you guys said is very accurate. I will say I think Andy Reid is incredibly underrated. I don't think and I know it sounds weird to hear me say that because everyone's like, oh yeah, of course, Andy Reid's a good coach. It's like, I don't think there's many coaches in the NFL that are better than him. The list I would probably put on one hand. I know he has problems with game management and all that stuff, but so does Mike Tomlin, and no one ever gives Mike Tomlin nearly as much shit for it as everyone does Andy Reid every year. And Andy Reid historically produces a winning team even when you don't expect it. It's just, me, bet against rookie quarterbacks, bet against the defense, and for that alone, I think the team will still be good. I actually do also think they'll win 8 to 9 games. I would bet more on 8 games though, more on the downside on that.
Right. Yeah, just because of the defense, honestly.
Yeah, but maybe Mahomes shouldn't be treated like a rookie quarterback because he was in the NFL for a year previously. But him especially, more so than the other guys, he's a gunslinger. He can do beautiful things. But players like that usually throw a lot of touchdowns, usually throw a lot of interceptions. That's kind of part of the package, and you just have to accept it. The reason why you get so many touchdowns is because he's constantly making high-risk throws. And the other side of that is that you turn the ball over a lot. And I think that will cost them some games this year that they probably should win otherwise. And agreed on Denver. I don't think Case Keenum last year had a great O-line, and in my opinion, the best 1-2 receiving core in the NFL.
Sure.
I said that last year before the season, and I got laughed at by my brother, who told me they're not even top 10. And, well, now I think everyone can agree that Thielen and Diggs are number 1 in terms of a 1-2 punch. And the O-line's going to be a lot worse this year. And, yes, Minnesota's O-line last year was top 3, But this one in Denver, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near that good. And the book on Keenum historically has been when he faces a blitz or a pass rush, he just turns into a complete shell. So I think for that reason, it's not crazy that maybe he's just a different quarterback now and maybe they win a lot of games. But I would bet against it because of that O-line problem, which is why I don't have a lot of faith in them. And, yeah, the Raiders are the Raiders. Derek Carr, most overrated quarterback in the NFL. I'll stand by that for the rest of my life. But that's all I have to say on that.
Yep. And, Case Keenum, I mean, weapons-wise, he's not coming into the worst situation in Denver, but coaching-wise, even though Vance Joseph is having the time of his life, I don't think that he's going to get out of Case Keenum what Pat Shurmur and company did last season. But I see it being kind of similar to last year for Denver with, obviously a talented defense. Who wouldn't want a pass rush that involves, Chubb and Von Miller? But it goes back to, them potentially being on the field for over half the game on a regular basis. And like you said, Keenum struggling against pass rushes. That's going to cause fits when they play the Chargers. So I see them avoiding the basement of the division, but I think that they're looking at 7-9, maybe 6-10, and the Raiders. Oh my gosh, you really get the feeling that Gruden coming in not too good for locker room morale, especially losing a guy like Khalil Mack, who's been one of the elite defensive players in the league. And especially so close to the start of the season, I think that that's very demoralizing, and the team took a huge step backwards last year.
Yeah, I think that's all very true. The defense was terrible last year with Khalil Mack, and I think it's only going to get worse. So, yeah, no reason to have any faith in them this year. Maybe they improve, down the line, later in the season, but I think they just might lose 2 games early on for it to matter.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with the Raiders, it's kind of funny because when they got rid of Khalil Mack, I think they went from a 40-1 Vegas odds to win the Super Bowl to 250-1 or something ridiculous, where they're just irrelevant now in the playoff talk.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify my Derek Carr comment because I don't think I was able to do it. I'll make this very brief. He doesn't play well against pressure, and the Raiders 2 years ago when he had that great season, the Raiders had the best O-line in the league. I think it was even better than the Dallas O-line that was getting all the hype with Zeke and Dak's rookie seasons. I actually think despite all the hype, the Raiders O-line that year was even better. And Carr was given such clean pockets, throwing to Amari Cooper and Crabtree, which at the time was one of the best receiving duos in the NFL. They tapered off last year, obviously. But at the time, he was given, kind of like Case Keenum in Minnesota, given a great O-line, given a great 1-2 combination in the receivers. Almost no quarterback is going to not play well under those contexts. Almost every relevant quarterback in the NFL, if you give them the league's best O-line and a top 3 wide receiver core, they're going to play really well. I just don't think it says that much about the quarterback when everything's going great and they're playing well. You learn a lot more when things are going bad, when the O-line's bad, the receivers aren't playing as well, and then you learn how the quarterbacks are performing. And every other year of Derek Carr's career, when things aren't perfect, he tends to make stupid decisions, throw unnecessary interceptions, and his mechanics go out of whack when he doesn't step into his throws. He's, I think, 3rd highest paid quarterback in the league or something like that. I don't care. That guy's not that good. I think a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL are better than him, despite his hype. That's my take.
Oh, 100%. And then when you look at the matchups, he's going to have to face 4 times a year the Chargers and the Broncos pass rush. That's just bad news for him. So, you're giving up some wins in the division right off the bat, and I see them probably trending toward the bottom of the AFC. So before we segue into the NFC, who do you like to win the AFC? Represent the AFC in the Super Bowl?
I think the team with the best roster is the Chargers.
Chargers?
I know it makes me a little uneasy to predict them to win the AFC because they're just known for making so many dumb coaching decisions late in the game last year. But I think they have the best team. Yeah.
I mean, statistically, I don't know. It scares me, like you said, to say that the Chargers will have a chance to come out on top. But just like I stated before, I think the Chiefs' defense is scary for me to say will win enough games to play better than the Chargers. Chargers have enough weapons and maybe one of the best wide receivers in the league, arguably, with Keenan Allen. The Broncos have their faults, and the Raiders are the Raiders. So I think really the Chargers will come out on top. Unless something happens with the Chiefs dramatically that they can pull it out, but I doubt it.
So are you in agreement with Ricky? Are you picking the Chargers to not only win the division, but the AFC as well?
I don't know about the AFC, but definitely...
Who's your AFC winner right now?
Oh, jeez.
It's not easy.
Nope, it's not.
I'm going to go out...
They all have flaws.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Texans. Maybe there's a little bit of bias in there because I'm a Giants fan. So if I had to pick a top two, I'd say Patriots and Texans, but I'm going to pull out the Texans on top.
Yeah, he copied from me. I was going to go with the Texans. I really think that this is going to be the year where the Patriots finally get what's coming to them, and they're going to not make the AFC title game, and the team that's going to bounce them is going to be the Texans. I would really love this. After last year, who wouldn't want to see another Deshaun Watson, Tom Brady duel? And I think that they're a volatile team. There's a chance they could miss the playoffs altogether, just like last year. But I think that they've got the most upside, potentially the most explosive offense in the division, and an experienced pass rush that can create havoc. And those have, in the past, proven to be tools to playoff success. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say they are going to go to Super Bowl L3.
I also think
I will just say...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say very quickly, whoever, regardless of who it is that knocks off the Patriots, for that to happen, they have to have the 1 seed. Because if the Patriots have the 1 seed again, I just think they're going to go back to the Super Bowl despite their flaws. So that's what makes it tough, because I picked the Chargers because I think they're a team that, because of the weaknesses in their division, can win enough games to get a high seed. No matter how good I think the Texans may be, or the Titans might pick win the division, that division is so tough. And it's like, I don't know if they can win enough games to be a 1 seed. But if they can, by all means, let's go.
Alrighty, well, we've reached the halfway point, and now it's time to switch conferences. We're going to go to the NFC, and we're going to kick things off with the NFC East, home of the greatest football organization in all of space and time, the New York Giants.
Wow.
And the team that won
I'm a Giants fan, and that's bold.
Yeah, and you got that team that won that
that thing.
That thing, that doesn't matter. And, they like to wear dog hats, and that's their thing, but...
The thing that we're literally orienting the entire show around.
Somebody remembers what it's called.
It's a piece of metal. There's usually some, some words engraved on it, right?
I'm going to make a bold strategy to start this division off.
All right, Cotton, let's see if it pays off.
Let's see if it pays off, Cotton. I think the Eagles miss the playoffs.
Wow.
Ooh, I like that. Ooh,
I would love that, but I don't agree with you.
Arguments.
How you feeling, Ricky?
What? Like my
What's your
feeling towards
thoughts
that
on
prediction?
my bold prediction?
It depends on how much Carson Wentz is out, and by the looks of it, you kind of get like an Andrew Luck from last year vibe,
right,
where I'm not saying he'll miss the whole season. That's crazy, but you do get a vibe that he may be hurt more than the team is letting on, and it might be a little while before we see him play. Like, it could be a situation where he actually doesn't play for a month, because just everything you're hearing in the preseason, it's just like, as the details get more and more revealed, it's like, oh wow, he's not cleared for contact yet. Well, once he does get cleared for contact, he probably needs, a week or two to actually practice with football and all that. So if he misses a lot of games, I don't think it's crazy. And this division never has a repeat winner. I know the Panthers in 2015 didn't win the Super Bowl, but they still went 15-1, clearly the best team in the NFC, and they placed last in their division the following year.
Right.
Obviously, no one predicts this stuff in August. Everyone only looks at it in hindsight at the end of the year. Oh, look at that, a Super Bowl team didn't make the playoffs. But another example, 2015 Broncos didn't make the playoffs the next year. It's these things happen. It's just right now in August, the hype is so high, and we only view them, as best team in the NFL and through no other lens, that it seems crazy. But I kind of like it. I think with Carson Wentz missing games, I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, and not only that, but Alshon Jeffrey, they're down. So
Yep.
yeah, that's I mean that's easily the best receiving option that they have, and it always seems to me that the new look revolutionary offense that nobody's ever seen before, that people say is going to change the game, the league seems to figure out the next year to at least some extent. So I don't see them surprising defenses as much as they did last year, although this is definitely a dynamic offense with a lot of speed. But it's just tough to repeat with that. You really got the feeling like they caught lightning in a bottle with Nick Foles at the right time last year. The defense can create havoc up front, but if you can get to that secondary, you can pick it apart. I am not going to predict that they will miss the playoffs, but I'm certainly not going to predict another 1 seed, and I'm going to say 10 wins for them. Tentatively,
I would go with more of a 9-7
I'd love to see it.
kind of year.
Maybe 6 wins, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a little bold.
No.
I would say they're a 9-7 kind of team. Maybe I don't want to say it, but I think maybe the Cowboys have a shot to outtake the division. I'd love to see the Giants do it. I just don't know if they will pull it out, really.
I think that the Giants, they really excite me this season. Their offense, with the way they've retooled the offensive line, if they're able to just upgrade to middle of the road by NFL standards after having, for my money, the worst line in the league last year. I mean, their defenses were just running through them like Swiss cheese. Eli Manning didn't have time to throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. And now getting Solder, drafting Hernandez, flipping Flowers to the other side, although I don't think he's worthy of a starting position in the league after what he showed. They've upgraded, and not just that, but they have that speed on offense I was talking about earlier. Especially adding Saquon Barkley just adds so much to this offense, not only to be able to pound the rock up the middle, but as a receiving option out of the backfield. Eli has been raving about Sterling Shepard's progress. You always hear about the third year is the breakout year for wide receivers. Odell Beckham sounds like he's healthy coming in. Evan Ingram adds even more havoc up there.
That's if he plays with the concussion stuff going on with him. I mean, that's a question mark, and we'll find out by Wednesday or Thursday. But still,
right. And you're giving up some blocking with him, and that's why you figure what would be most natural for them would be a 2 tight end set. That way you can have Red Ellison giving the protection up front while you can potentially play Ingram out of the slot. But I mean, between the 4 of them, Eli, he's got a lot of options to throw the ball to. And what's crazy about Eli is a lot of people came down on him last year when, again, all of his receivers went out, and his completion percentage was actually one of the better ones that he put up in several years, and that's with having some of the most drops in the league, throwing to these guys who'd be riding the bench in an ordinary year. Defensively, it's going to be different because they have a 3-4, and they're lacking experience at defensive end. And what makes me nervous is that Eli Apple is going to be one of the starting cornerbacks on this team, and I'm not sure that's something I'm ready for. But I am excited about the fact that they've added some personnel in the linebacker department with Ogletree, with Lorenzo Carter, dropping Olivier Vernon back there as part of this new 3-4 set with James Betcher, who coached a very successful program over in Arizona. So I'm excited to see what he could do, but it's such a new, different defense that I don't feel comfortable laying down any bold predictions as far as those results. I think offensively you have a better idea of how things could potentially turn out.
Obviously, I'm not a Giants fan like you two are, but I'm okay with the team. I got nothing really against them. There's teams in the NFL that I actively root against, not just my division opponents, but
right.
Just random teams that I want to see fail. The Jim Caldwell Lions was a great example of just a team I really wanted to see fail, just because despite the fact that they kept winning games, I just thought that they were just an overrated team. Stafford, I think, is not as good as people think. I think he's gotten better for sure, but I still think he has some limitations, but we can save that for later. But I don't root against the Giants. But I just think they're just going to be kind of there. Not particularly good, not particularly bad. Kind of like that streak towards the end of the Tom Coughlin days when, they would go multiple years in a row, just going 7-9, 6-10. That's what I can see, because I have a little more faith in the other teams in the division. Not the Redskins. We haven't talked about them yet, but I do not know why so many people are so confident in Alex Smith. I know he played a lot better last year, but that was still just 1 year. And now he doesn't have the competition pushing him with Mahomes on the bench. Now he's given a $91 million contract, and he's the entrenched starter. And what's to say he doesn't just revert back to his old ways when he is pedestrian, except this time he doesn't have a legendary coach and a legendary offensive roster.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't have the Tyreek
advantage.
Hills and the Kareem Hunts and the Travis Kelce's. I mean, great. He's got Jordan Reed, who, I don't know, is probably still hurt, and Adrian Peterson is 77 years old. So, I mean, does he have...
It's a back by committee. He's not going to be seeing 30 touches a game.
Correct. Exactly. It's not an Adrian Peterson of old, and I don't think he has the weapons that he used to, really. And can he play well? Obviously. Has he played well? Yes. But not all the time, and not well enough for the Redskins to be, you know, a number 2 in the division kind of record.
Yeah, that's exactly how I view it as well. I think Doxson's a little underrated by a lot of people because he's been hurt a lot, and I know a lot of people have just said, "Oh, well, he doesn't see the field, he gets hurt a lot, like he's like Devontae Parker for the Dolphins." I think that comparison is fair in some ways, but I think Doxson is like a talented kid. When he does get the chance to get the ball, there were many plays last year where he made Kirk Cousins look like the game-winning throw Kirk Cousins made against the Seahawks on the road that everyone went crazy for. That was all Doxson. Doxson saved that one to make that catch. So I do think he's impressive, but he is always hurt. He does never see the field, and despite the Redskins having a really strong O-line, I just don't know if I have enough confidence in Smith for that reason. And Giants, I think, will be okay. Again, it's all about winning games in your division, and when I think there's 2 teams better than you in your division, it's just tough to, have like a 9-10 win season when you struggle so much in your division. So that's kind of the way I see it.
I actually think that they are going to get to that 10-win mark. I think that the Eagles are going to edge them out on a tiebreaker. I think that the Giants are going to surprisingly pull off the upset early in the season when they play Philly on that Thursday night game. But then it's going to be that later matchup that's going to make the difference in them losing the division. But I like the Giants' chances better than I do the Cowboys. I think that defensively they have some holes. I think offensively, Dak Prescott now losing big targets, although he didn't have the greatest chemistry with Des Bryant, losing him and Jason Witten. And we saw the difference in Dak playing mistake-free versus not playing mistake-free. And having Ezekiel Elliott back for all 16 games is going to be imperative to this offense, but I view them as more of a rich man's Jaguars situation they have going on here, where they have a quarterback that kind of needs some support and doesn't have a lot of depth in receiving options. So I'd see the Cowboys topping out at around, I think 8-8 is best case scenario. I'm going to predict 7-9 for them.
I will just say on the Cowboys, my opinion can really be boiled down to one thing. I think Dak Prescott is really underrated. And whether you do or don't like him, I just don't like when we always do this as an NFL community, where after 2016, everyone loves him. And after 2017, all those same people are now turning on him. And I don't like, quarterback play oscillates from year to year. I don't like when we drastically change our opinions of players after one season. And the 2016 Dak is still part of him. That is still there. And I think he's a lot better than he's given credit for. You frequently see him go through his progressions. You frequently see him bail the offense out of trouble. Even with the issues at left tackle last year, there's still a lot of times where the O-line breaks down and he scrambles and finds a way to make a play. I think he's a really, really underrated quarterback. And if Carson Wentz doesn't play, I think he's the best quarterback in that division. And generally, I bet on the best quarterback in the division. Usually, that's the team that usually does well. And I agree with the problems in the receiving core, but as you mentioned, they struggled last year in the passing game, and I think Michael Gallup is really underrated. Really talented kid that they picked up who's going to start at the extra seat. I think you'll see him surprise a lot of people. He can separate, and Des Bryant last year couldn't separate at all. And when you add separation to the receiving core into that offense, that passing game is going to be a lot better. Presuming, the O-line, Tyron Smith stays relatively healthy. I understand they have some concerns with Travis Frederick and his new injury. But waste. So I understand the flaws. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went 8-8 or 7-9, but I would bet on them. I would just bet on them a little more than I would bet on the Giants because I think, with all due respect, gentlemen, I think the quarterback is better, and I think they have elite players on the team than the Giants do, which usually is what helps carry you to more wins in this league.
I will say this on quarterback play. We haven't seen Eli Manning, most successful he's ever been in his career, has been with an effective play action, and he hasn't had that since, I want to say, 2012.
Yeah.
So if they establish that throughout his career, whether it was Plaxico Burress, Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, Steve Smith, it was always play action, set up that deep sideline bomb. We haven't seen him be able to whip that play out, both due to the lack of a running game and a lack of protection. So if either of those return, I think you're going to see a different quarterback even at age 37, 38. So,
yeah, I mean, I think I said it earlier. I can see the Cowboys pulling off the NFC East as much as I don't want to. The Giants, I hope they surprise me, but I don't see them any more than a 6 or 7 win team, really.
And the Redskins,
I feel the same, but we'll see.
So, let's. Okay, next up we have the NFC North. Which got a little bit more interesting now that the Bears have opened their wallets. But I don't see them inching up toward the big two, which some would say might be the 2 Super Bowl favorites in the NFC. The Packers and the Vikings. I think that the Vikings getting Dalvin Cook back and bringing in Kirk Cousins with Diggs and Thielen, this is an offense that should do some serious damage.
Yeah, I mean, I see the Bears maybe out-taking the Lions for the 3rd spot. I don't see them doing anything more than that.
No.
The Vikings, I like as a team. I'm not on the Kirk Cousins believer train. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't know if he's an elite quarterback. I don't know if he's going to bring them to the Super Bowl. I think the Vikings are a phenomenal team. Adam Thielen is arguably one of the best players in the NFL statistically. I mean, fantasy owners loved him last year. Dalvin Cook, a huge loss early in the season, so I definitely think they have a chance. I don't think they will outplay the Packers. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and there's really not much else to say about that.
Yeah, I actually think that's kind of one of the sad things about why they couldn't get to the Super Bowl last year. Not just because it was in Minnesota last year, but you're not going to have Aaron Rodgers injured every season, And when he's hurt,
hopefully,
Packers are out of it. That's when you got to capitalize. That's when you got to really make your Super Bowl run, because when he comes back, it's hard to get. If you don't win your division, it's really hard to make a Super Bowl run because you never have home field advantage in the playoffs. And it's not impossible. Obviously, we've seen teams like year two's Giants, do this before, where you can be a wild card team and still make a Super Bowl run. But it's just a lot harder. And lately in the NFL, I think every year since I want to say 2013, 2012, the 1 seed has made the Super Bowl, with the exception of the 2016 Cowboys. Every other 1 seed has made the Super Bowl. So it's just hard. Really hard to make a Super Bowl run when you don't win your own division. And I agree. I'm not super big on Kirk Cousins. I think he was a little overhyped relative to his numbers last year. And I don't think it's talk about it puts the show in a deeper light, but the passing of O-line coach Tony Sperano, I do think is a big deal, because that O-line last year was really good, but it was the O-line last year was really good, but it was terrible the year before. And it was a lot they brought in Pat Elflein as their new center, as a rookie, but it was really a lot of guys who had great careers who played really well together, which is usually a sign of coaching. It's not like they had a bunch of highly rated talented players on the O-line. Their O-line was the worst O-line in the league the year before. There are a lot of decent guys who played really well together, and that's usually a sign of coaching. And when you lose your O-line coach, you don't know if the next guy can replace that production. And it was only 2 years ago when that line was terrible. And if that line's not any good, I mean, I love Adam Thielen. I think he's really underrated. He also runs a 4.49, so he's actually a really athletic guy, despite his perception.
Yeah.
But if the line doesn't hold up, as talented as Dalvin Cook is, I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. I've been watching Dalvin Cook for literally a decade because I remember recruiting him coming out of high school and rooting against him when he played for Florida State. But like, if the O-line doesn't play very well, then as talented as the offense is, they could struggle. And it would not surprise me. I'm not saying I have the courage to predict it, but it would not surprise me if they didn't make the playoffs at all, despite, having such a great season last year. Just because Aaron Rodgers is back, the Bears got a lot better. So they might win less games in their division this year relative to last year. And then if the line doesn't play very well, that could be a problem, despite, in my opinion, Mike Zimmer being a top 5 coach in the league.
Yep, and I know I came out singing the Vikings' praises, but I will say this about Kirk Cousins. I think that a lot of his stats are kind of inflated due to play. Here's the thing with him.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. A lot of it's in garbage time.
A lot of it's in garbage time. He hasn't played in a lot of meaningful football games. That being said, I do think he's an upgrade at the position over Case Keenum. I think he's shown more competency at the position throughout his career than Keenum has. And if Case was able to take the team as far as he did last year, or contribute to taking the team that far with no Dalvin Cook, I do think Kirk Cousins is going to be successful. Do I think that he might not hit 4K yards, even with Diggs and Thielen? Potentially. But I think that they have a balanced enough and dangerous enough offense, and and probably the best defense in that division as well. I'm going to predict 12 wins for them. I'm going to say first round bye, and the Packers adding Muhammad Wilkerson was, he's got some years on him, but it was a good addition on the line. But defensively, they've had some holes in recent years. I think that Aaron Rodgers back for a full season is good enough to guarantee at least 10 wins. I think that they'll get to 11, but I just don't think they're as well rounded as Minnesota. I think that they're a bit not offering as much in the running game to offset when Rodgers does get under pressure. But they're obviously going to be a very good team. With Rodgers throwing to Jimmy Graham, that's going to be just like him and Jordy Nelson, if not more. Some people are saying that Graham's going to break the single-season touchdown record.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
And
I'd go out on a limb to agree. I think Graham's one of the best tight ends in the league. So,
I will say this about the Packers. Last year, before Aaron Rodgers got hurt, the Packers were the best team in that division, not the Vikings. And they hired Mike Pettin to run the defense this year, finally fired Dom Capers after all these years, which I think would make the defense better. And as someone who was a frustrated Aaron Jones fantasy owner last year, I think Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are really underrated backs. Jamal Williams has some flaws. I think he's not as good as his numbers indicate, but Aaron Williams is a stud as a runner. And had he not gotten hurt, he really would have taken off last year. And Aaron Rodgers hasn't had a lot of star running production from the running game. And I think if Jones can be a star runner in Montgomery a lot as passing backs, I think the offense could be a lot better. It wouldn't surprise me. It's it did really well despite all the concerns I laid out. But I just think that you got to bet on Aaron Rodgers, man. You got to bet on the Packers. For them to get a first-round bye, that means the Packers don't win the division this year, which when Aaron is healthy, that has only happened, I think, once in the last 7 years.
Right.
And yes, and it was the Vikings that beat him that time, but that Packers team was a lot worse. They lost Jordy Nelson at the start of the season. Adams was a lot worse than now. He got a lot better over the past few years. It was just, and Dom Capers was still running the defense. It was just a different team. So I would bet on that history, which is also, why no matter the Dolphins or the Jets or whatever, you bet on the history of the Patriots, even with the flaws, you bet on them to run through the division. And that's I guess just my perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll go with a 12-4 Packers, in the Vikings maybe in the 10 to 11 range. I'd say they top out at the 11 range. Yep.
I'm gonna say the Bears are going to be third place.
Yes.
You know what? The Bears have. I'm not gonna say playoff contender, but I do think that they have a higher ceiling than they've had in recent years. You look at this offense: a full season of Trubisky,
But he's also a big question mark. He could He could play on either side of the spectrum, and if he plays well enough, I mean, I could see him possibly contending, but that's very bold. Third place for me with the Bears.
You've got a top 10 running back in there with Jordan Howard and Allen Robinson out there at receiver, and adding Khalil Mack is going to bolster the defense. So I think that I see them surpassing Detroit, if nothing else. They play in a very hard division. It's going to be almost impossible to threaten to win it, but I think that they're going to take a step forward.
I think Allen Robinson is one of the more underrated wide receivers in the league. That dude's a super talent, and we just didn't realize it because Blake Bortles was the quarterback. But I think that with proper quarterback play, people will realize Allen Robinson's a lot better than people figure.
Yeah.
And that plus Trey Burton, Matt Nagy had so much success in Kansas City with Travis Kelce kind of playing the F role in the offense. Like, you run some 2 tight end sets, but the tight end that plays the F role is the one that usually gets a lot of targets in the passing game. And I think that's what Trey Burton is going to be like for Chicago this year. And I think he's a great offseason addition. So that, plus obviously Khalil Mack and Vic Fangio running the defense, I agree. I think they could play a lot better. It sucks that in the same division as the Vikings and the Packers, although it wouldn't completely surprise me if they did better than the Vikings, given all the concern I laid about the Vikings just now. But it still sucks that they're playing in the same division as like 2 of the most highly regarded teams in the league. Because I think if they were in like a much weaker division, they would really have a chance to shine this year. So hopefully they could still do well.
Yep. All right. Moving on, NFC South talk. I think that we're going to see another tight race between the Saints and the Falcons last year. I think the Saints really caught everyone by storm with that Kamara-Ingram tandem last year, which makes things... It really is exactly what you want when you have an aging starting quarterback, am I right? To really switch up that offense and diversify your options there. And they've always been a very dangerous home team. And the key for the Saints has always been winning at home. You look at any success that they've had in the postseason, it's come when they've won at home. So I think that the Falcons are coming back with pretty much just as good of an offense as last year. So I think you're going to see a similar division race to that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would see the Saints playing in one of the top 2 spots. Alvin Kamara is great, and reportedly as of today, I believe they just signed and or are signing Gillislee since the Patriots dropped him. So I mean, that's adding another potentially decent running back to the committee if you need him. I mean, he put up some okay numbers last year. So, I mean, it definitely adds a little bit of depth there. I would say the Falcons probably end up pulling that division out, but the Saints definitely have a potential to take over that division.
I agree. I think the Saints, are really well-rounded this year.
Sure.
As are the Falcons. I think the Panthers are also stood. I think that Christian McCaffrey is going to be even better this year than he was last year. And I think that, this is a really competitive division. I still think the Bucs are going to be bottom of the barrel, even though a lot of data indicates, according to efficiency metrics, their offense was pretty good last year. They converted first downs at a higher rate than almost any offense in the league. They just, they had a lot of turnovers and they couldn't turn it into touchdowns. But according to offensive efficiency, they had a really good offense. We just it just didn't really translate to wins and points and turnovers and all that. But my problem with them is mainly the coach, and I love. Well, and Jameis being suspended for 3 games, of course, and that's the problem. As good as I think they should be, their division is really hard. I just don't think they're better than the other 3 teams. And on top of that, if they start out the season 0-3, 0-4, or something like that, is suspended, that's a situation where the head coach could get fired. And when the head coach gets fired, the guy comes in, it's just really hard to see a team like that pull out an 8-win season or a 9-win season. Teams like that usually go 5-11.
Yeah, so, look at the first 5 games of their season minus the bye weeks. So the first 5 games they actually play: Saints, Eagles, Steelers, Bears, Falcons. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're not going to win a single one of those. And I'd even
that Bears game is in Chicago, too.
Yeah, and it's in Chicago. Yeah, I'd go even farther and say they end up with the worst record in the NFL this year.
It's a shame because I think they have a lot of promise. I think Chris Godwin is an incredibly underrated player. He's really, really, really good. And I don't think he'll be better than Mike Evans, but like people will see like he's a dangerous player this year. But it's just tough, like, you know, with the issues like coaching, the schedule, their division, like everything you just said doesn't even talk about like all the other division games they have this year against the Panthers, Saints, and Falcons. Like it's like, well, aside from the division games you mentioned, I meant, but you get the point. Yeah, I think they're going to be bottom of the barrel. I think the Panthers are going to be really good though. It could be a world where 3 teams come out of this division again. In order for that to be true, that would probably mean, that would mathematically mean that one of Green Bay or Minnesota wouldn't make the playoffs, which, again, I'm kind of down on Minnesota, so that wouldn't shock me too much. But, yeah, I think all 3 teams are going to be really good, competing all year. But I do agree that I think the Saints win the division, but I definitely think the Falcons make the playoffs, like, for sure.
Yeah, they've just got too talented of an offense not to. You know, I mean, it's been the same for the last several years, but really, with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and the tandem of Freeman and Coleman, it's hard to see them winning at minimum 9 games. I'm going to say 10. And now they've got the playoff experience of the last couple seasons, so they've got they've got the experience in the big games, and I think the Panthers are going to be the odd team out in this situation just due to the momentum of the others. I don't think they have quite the firepower. Newton's proven to be kind of inconsistent, and I just think when you've got 2 teams on top that have those running back tandems, that just creates a lot of speed and it's hard to defend. So I'm gonna say 11 wins for the Falcons actually, and 10 for the Saints. I misspoke. But the Panthers, I'm going to say 7 and 9, just based on the difficulty of the division. But it's not going to. It's a situation where if they played in the NFC West, there might be a good chance they'd get second place. But the Bucks, again, tough luck, but I could see them bottom of the league as well. They really, in the Winston era, they've had so many seasons where they've shown going in that they've got the potential to take that next step forward, but due to the competition, they really need to play in a division without the offensive firepower of their rivals to grow, and they haven't had that opportunity.
Yeah, agree on that front.
So, NFC West, now we go to what I think is the best team in the NFL this season, and the team that I think is going to break through and get to the Super Bowl, the Rams. This team was so loaded up last year and caught people by surprise, and all they've done is strengthen that roster, adding Brandon Cooks to an offense that already put up ridiculous numbers last year. And on top of that, you look at this defense, the line has 4 first-round picks with Aaron Donald, Ndamukong Suh, Michael Brockers, and Dominique Easley. I mean, good luck blocking that.
I mean, they also added Marcus Peters, and I mean that's an elite corner right there. So I mean, you're talking, and I mean Aqib Talib's down there too. So I mean that's, I mean on paper, unless some lightning strikes in the middle of that stadium, on paper they're the best defense in the league, arguably. I would say that they are. I would definitely put them at the top of that division also. I mean, I think the Seahawks play well enough to contend, but the Rams definitely overtake them. The 49ers have a little bit of potential. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo over there. Adding Richard Sherman is great, but I don't think he's the Richard Sherman of 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think he's a little older, a little more washed up, not the fastest guy in the league. I think there's enough wide receivers in the league that are really going to be able to burn him on some of these longer routes. So the 49ers are definitely good, and I think the Cardinals fall off the face of the earth, really.
I find this division really hard to talk about because it's just all teams have so many warts, but all teams have so many upside. I'm not as high on the Rams as you guys are.
No?
Look, first, I do think they'll probably win the division, so let me just get that out of the way right there. But I think Jared Goff's a really overrated quarterback. And talk about, our opinions drastically changing from year to year. This guy was talked about as having one of the worst rookie seasons in NFL history. People didn't just say he was bad. They said he was Ryan Leaf bad. That's how bad it was. And last year, with the assistance of Sean McVay and the change in the play calling and some growth on Jared Goff's end, the offense was a lot better, and he played a lot better. but I still don't think he's a top half quarterback in the league. I just think he's a decent quarterback who plays in a good offense. And kind of like Case Keenum in Minnesota, like a guy with a good line and good weapons, like is usually going to play well, especially with good coaching on top of that. I have no issue with the defense. Like everything mentioned about the defense is accurate. Like the defense is going to be really talented. All that I fully agree with. My main thing with this team is that Sean McVay operated on a lot of what Sean like talk about the Eagles. If we talk about the Eagles concepts, getting exposed and defenses playing against them better the following year, I don't see why that wouldn't also apply to the Rams, especially when the Rams have more obvious limitations, like a worse quarterback than the Eagles, etc. The Rams' best O-lineman last year was in his late 30s in Andrew Whitworth, and it's very possible that his play drops off just because he's really old. I hate to be so crude about it, but that is a risk factor to be considered. And I think my other main thing with them and Sean McVay in general is that they haven't really faced a lot of adversity. And when they face adversity, how are players going to respond to Sean McVay? A 31-year-old kid. Like, I mean, not a kid, but you get the point. Like, I know they respect him. They think he's really smart. But Mark Trestman, his first year in Chicago, they only went 8-8. But his first year in Chicago, even though they only went 8-8, I remember everybody was calling him a genius, a savant, someone who really understands the NFL, had a high-powered offense. And then the following season, Chicago started losing games, and the locker room kind of turned on him because he didn't respond to adversity very well, despite being called a genius and an offensive savant the year before. I'm not saying that will happen to McVay. McVay very well could be different. It's just that we don't know because he hasn't faced that adversity yet. And Chip Kelly, another one, his first year was cited as a genius. Players eventually turned on him 2 years later as well. Like, it's not the first time we've had this offensive wizard come in, take the league by storm, and then something drastic happens the following season. I think there's too much talent on the defense for them to miss the playoffs entirely. I just cite all those things as concerns and things that could derail them, even if I'm not confident they will. Just risk factors I identified that I don't see being talked about a whole lot. And the other main thing with me is I think people are kind of underrating the Seahawks. I know they had a lot of turnover on defense, but they had the best coach in the division and they had the best quarterback in the division. And usually when you have the best coach and quarterback in the division, you win the division. Now, I don't think this is one of those cases because last year, I would argue, they also had the best coach and quarterback in the division and did not win the division. But I think that will always give them a chance. Like, no matter how much turnover there is on defense, like, having the best QB and the best coach in your division just gives you such an advantage that I think that they are probably I think they're going to do exactly what they did last year. They'll probably win 9 games again. And maybe not enough for the playoffs, but they'll be competitive all year long. And then on the other two, I think Arizona's a little underrated. Like, I understand they could very well bottom off the face of the earth, but their defense was really good last year towards the end of the season. Number 3 ranked defense in the league, according to a lot of metrics. And Sam Bradford's an underrated quarterback. Like, when he's been healthy the last 2 years, he's been really, really good. And a really good quarterback and a really good defense, that's usually going to win a good amount of games. But I agree with the concern that you guys probably think of as soon as I say Sam Bradford. He might not stay healthy.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
if he doesn't stay healthy, that's a problem.
Yeah, and on top of losing Honey Badger, that doesn't help either. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a fan of him as a safety, and not a lot of, I don't want to say not a lot of people are, but there are definitely people that root against him. But I think losing him does not help that defense.
Along with losing their coordinator.
However, getting David Johnson back, hopefully, knock on wood, he doesn't blow his knee out again. I mean, he's arguably one of the best running backs in the league when he's healthy.
When healthy, he's top 3.
So,
yeah.
You get a top 3 running back, healthy and back onto the field. However, you lose a top 5 safety in the league, and it's tough. I mean, I don't know. Sam Bradford, same thing. Will he stay healthy? I have no idea. Josh Rosen, does he step in if Sam Bradford doesn't stay healthy? We don't know. But I don't see them being a 3. Or a top 3 team in that division. I see them being at the bottom of the barrel.
There's just too much. They're really sacrificing a lot of depth offensively when you compare them to the Rams and what the 49ers could potentially offer because there's just not a lot behind Larry Fitzgerald. And again, there's uncertainty at the with Sam Bradford at quarterback. I think that the Seahawks, like you mentioned, it's hard to say that they're going to fall off the face of the earth despite the turnover personnel-wise. I do think that they're also lacking roster depth, especially compared to the Rams. but I think that Russell Wilson, on the offensive side of the ball, their line is nothing is obviously nothing pretty to look at, but he's proven that he can play well without that support. So I'm going to say that the Seahawks and Niners are both going to, one's going to win 8, one's going to win 9. The 9-win team will narrowly miss out on a playoff spot. I think that we really don't know entirely what we're going to get out of Garoppolo in a full season, especially playing just a bunch of meaningless games at the end of last year. But they've definitely upgraded their roster, and Shanahan has done some good things at head coach. So I think that they'll take a step forward, but I don't see anybody touching the Rams. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and predict that they're going to get the top seed. I'm going to say 13-3 for them because we've kind of avoided the elephant in the room with talking about them, which is Todd Gurley, who might be the best all-purpose player in the league right now. So I see this team once again putting up a ton of points, and I think that they're going to take the NFC by storm.
It wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, because despite all my concerns, like the defense is like really, really, really talented.
Sure.
I just don't trust Jared Goff, and I think it's fair. Like in that playoff game against the Falcons, like he was a big part of the problem. Like in the second half, when they really needed, and look, if like Jared knows this about me, like I really hate a lot of modern analysis about quarterbacks, like revolving around, can he play in the clutch? Can he play in the big game? Because I just think almost every NFL quarterback can, on a good team, do well in the clutch, and we've seen it over the years. We've seen so many bad quarterbacks, but with good offensive talent around them, do really well in the postseason. Like I'm not really big into that because I think most guys can now there's some times where a quarterback needs to carry bad talent, and maybe you can derive some differentiators of that, but that's not because some are clutch and some are not clutch. That's just because some are better quarterbacks. Yeah. Like the elite quarterbacks can do it with worse talent, but some quarterbacks can't, and that's fine. But in any event, like all I wanted to say was in that Falcons game, they really needed, like they were down multiple scores. They really needed to go down the field and like get big plays in order to get the comeback, to get the lead. And Jared Goff was just checking it down over and over and over again when his team really needed him to go down the field. Stuff like that I don't like. And oftentimes last year, if you watch the Rams, all the games they won were the games they were leading most of the way anyways, very similar to the Jaguars.
Right.
There were rarely games where they were behind. Like, there were a few games that were back and forth, like their game against the Cowboys where they're just trading scores. That's one thing. But there was very rarely, like the Panthers took an early lead on them. And I think it was the Vikings. The Vikings took an early lead on them, and then the Rams just cratered. Like, they scored 7 points the whole game. And that's the stuff I worry about. I'm not saying Goff is Blake Bortles. He's clearly better than Blake Bortles. But if they were to get in I still think they're going to win the division.
Hate Blake Bortles, don't you?
I don't like Blake
Bortles. Listen, Austin. For you don't know the story. Me and Ricky go way back, and when Ricky was growing up, Blake Bortles he actually lived across the street from him, and
no.
I mean the night before Halloween, he egged his house, and he's never gotten over it.
This is not fair. I'll say this: I like it when the NFL is meritocratic, and to me, it is not meritocratic that Teddy Bridgewater is sitting on a bench somewhere in New Orleans and Blake Bortles gets to be a quarterback of one of the most talented rosters in the league this year. And that's all fine. I get it. Life's unfair sometimes. But I just want us as like media and evaluators to be better.
Oh, sure, yeah. And
like I don't want people to say because Blake Bortles was in the conference championship game, oh, he's actually really good. He's a big play quarterback. Like, analysis like that drives me crazy.
The playoff winning quarterback narrative should have died when Trent Dilfer won it with the Ravens. I think that should have been the end of we judge you based purely on your playoff success.
And that's kind of, I guess, why I maybe have more of a tilt on Blake than most people. But I guess what I'm saying is even if I think the Rams can win the division in the playoffs, and not because Jared Goff is not clutch or like he doesn't have the big game gene, just because like he's not that good at quarterbacking when they're down multiple scores, if they're down multiple scores, and they can't really use a lot of their creative play calling as much and kind of just need to make tough, predictable throws. I don't think he can execute it very well. Because he's historically been a not very good deep passer in his career. And I think as a result of that, you'll just see them kind of sputter in January. But hey, maybe Jared's right and they go to the Super Bowl. I don't know. It's very possible. It's very possible what you're saying.
I'm going to respond to what you said about them not facing adversity, though, and I'm going to say that you raised a good point, and not only about that, but the fact that they were. I think I remember because I think back to that playoff game against the Falcons. It really felt like they were just a couple big Jared Goff throws away from stringing together that drive to get them back into it, and you kept waiting, and eventually time ran out, and it never happened. And this kind of not to tie it back to the home team, but it reminds me of before the Eli Manning postseason narrative was born. The first ever playoff game that he competed in, it was his second year in the league. They had compiled an 11-win season. They're hosting a playoff game in the wild card round. Eli Manning throws 3 interceptions as the team gets shut out. And I think what that goes to show, and based on what happened a couple of years later, is sometimes, you can catch fire without the playoff experience because at the end of the day, it's still football. But sometimes just getting that adversity under your belt and knowing what the situation is going to be like when you encounter it again can mentally prepare you for what's to come. And I think that they were the new team on the block, this explosive offense that nobody had seen before, and then they had their world crash down on them last year. I think coming back, but revamping the roster and retooling, strengthening it depth-wise even more, and still bringing back that vaunted defense, I think that they're more prepared. And especially with the youth of the head coach was worth mentioning as well, but I think that they're going to grow from that. I think that was the adversity. I think that was the wake-up call that they needed.
I think that's a very good argument. So we'll see what happens. You might be right on that. We'll see. I don't really know either way. I didn't say anything on the Niners because I don't think there is anything to say. Right. That team is a total mystery. No one could predict anything.
Yeah. I think somewhere in the middle of the road is probably safe to bet. 7-9, 9-7, somewhere in between.
It's a 500 with a question mark and an asterisk.
Yeah, yeah.
And on that, where do we see the NFC going? Who's taking the NFC and who's making it to the Super Bowl on that side?
Well, I think Jared already exposed his with the Rams, right?
Yeah, well, no, I'm picking the Bears. No.
All right, well, just to confirm, Jared, what do you say?
Yeah, the Rams are going to beat the Minnesota Eagles, who will lose the NFC Championship game once again. That was me making fun of the Eagles for losing a bunch of NFC Championships in the previous decade by saying the Vikings are going to lose back-to-back NFC title games.
I'm going to go with the Packers. I know, it's boring, it's cliche. I feel like everybody every year picks the Packers to win the Super Bowl, but this year is actually one of the exceptions because the Vikings had such a great season last year, which makes me want to pick the Packers. Aaron Rodgers is back, and I really do think Mike Pettin on the defense, if you watch the Packers' history over the years against the Cardinals in 2015, against the Seahawks in 2014, they've had some, defensive collapses in the final moments of games that have really cost them, and I'm just going to bet that that's just not going to happen again. Or even in 2016 where their defense just got absolutely torched by the Falcons the whole game. I'm just betting that that's not going to happen again because I think Mike Pettin's a really good coach, defense coordinator for the Jets all those years, and the Bills right after when the Bills also had a decent defense. So I predict the Packers to win over the Saints in the championship round.
That would be a really fun game.
Yeah, and I'll be randomly creative and say that it's a home game for New Orleans and the Packers win on the road.
Wow.
Just because I don't know, why not add some more spice to it? So that's my spice I'm going to add to it. But yeah, I think the Packers win the Super Bowl this year.
I'm very torn between the Packers and the Rams. I love Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. I love his mentality on and off the field.
Best quarterback in the league.
Agreed, 100%. I can't argue with that. Obviously, statistically and just personally, there's no way to argue that. I want to go with the Rams just because something about them feels like they're really going to pull through this year. I know you're scared on Jared Goff. I think that defense is immaculate, especially with the addition of Marcus Peters. I'm a Marcus Peters fan. I think they can really pull it out. But if not, definitely the Packers are right behind them. And if it's not between the two of them, I don't know who the hell it'll be through.
And I'm gonna say this to respond to your to Ricky, your spicy prediction of the Saints losing the NFC Championship at home. First of all, a special shout out to the Call to the Bullpen Statistics Department. The Saints have not lost a home playoff game since 1992.
Which was a year before I was born.
So that would, I mean, it would be awesome. But that especially in the Drew Brees era, they've been unbeaten. I'm pretty sure they've been unbeaten at home and winless on the road in the playoffs.
Well, let me just say the following. Firstly, I don't think they've ever played Aaron Rodgers in a home game in the playoffs before.
Right.
Secondly,
the plot thickens.
Secondly, the Saints should have lost the NFC Championship game in 2009 against the Vikings. This is when Brett Favre's Vikings were in field goal range. They were ready to kick a field goal and win the game outright, denying the validity of that statistic. And then Brett Favre threw a stupid pick as they were in field goal range, and the game went into overtime and they lost. But had I not done that mind-bogglingly stupid throw, the Vikings would have kicked the field goal and the Vikings would have won that game. So it's not impossible. And I think another Packers quarterback can do it to them this year instead.
It's it's definitely very possible. And don't beat yourself over picking the Packers to the Super Bowl. That's not the boring prediction. The boring prediction is the Packers-Patriots Super Bowl, which is never going to happen, and I'm tired of hearing that it's going to happen every year. Every season!
That's, yeah. I mean, the two best quarterbacks in the NFL, so definitely the boring pick. So we definitely had some good info thrown back and forth here, and
no doubt.
Some good predictions, and we'll see what happens this year. It should be an exciting year. Some divisions are kind of boring. Some will make up for the boringness of the other ones, definitely.
No doubt. And Eli Manning's going to win league MVP. Saquon Barkley,
Jesus.
Rookie of the Year.
Oh my God!
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a Giants fan, and I disagree with both of those statements.
I just want to.
Eli Apple's gonna win. Eli Apple's gonna win Defensive Player of the Year as well, right? Like,
if Eli Apple gets 3 interceptions, then I might do a cartwheel, and I've never done a cartwheel in my life. So, so yeah, that's where things stand, and I'm gonna be honest, folks. I think that with the season starting, we're gonna make this show more NFL. Definitely more NFL centered. I will be completely honest and say that during the preseason, we were kind of fishing for news topics, but I think that we're going to work in weekly recaps, weekly predictions. We really want to blow this up, and please, on our Facebook page, please comment below in the links and the posts that we share. Offer up your suggestions, feedback. We want to respond to if anybody has any responses to the points that we've made with this week. Ricky, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your input. It was a pleasure, and we definitely hope to have you back on.
Oh, I'm really happy you guys had me on. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to come back on whenever.
All right, fantastic. Guys, thank you as always for listening and downloading. We're now available on iTunes and Spotify, and our home base on Libsyn. That's
Call to the Bullpen Call to the Bullpen podcast.libsyn.com. We're also available on the Stitcher app. If anybody uses the Stitcher app, fire away. Look us up on there. As always, give us some reviews, some feedback. Check out our Facebook page at Call to the Bullpen podcast. Comment below, like Jared said. Give us your feedback. Give us your 2 cents, your arguments. If you disagree with anything that either of us, the 3 of us, have said, or either me and Jared on the previous 5 shows, comment on our posts. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to give you some shout outs and see what you think. Like I said, share it, like it, listen, tell your friends, family, get it out there.
Including that creepy guy on the subway that sits next to you and won't shut up.
Something like that. Tell that guy too. So thank you as always. Ricky, thank you for coming on. Again, like I said, it was a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back. And on that note, I believe this is Called to the Bullpen.
And we are hanging up.